They say friendship is a mirror of the soul, that when you find a true friend, you found another version of yourself. I used to believe that. Until the day I learned that even the truest bond can rot under the weight of greed. My name is Richard, and this is the story of how I lost everything I built with my own hands, not to fate, not to failure, but to the man I once called brother. It started 20 years ago, in a small rented office with cracked walls and a broken ceiling fan. I was 31, fresh out of one disappointment and stepping into another. Life hadn't been kind to me, not after my father's death left my mother with debts we could barely count. But I had a dream, and I had a friend. His name was Adrian. We met in college, two ambitious boys who shared the same hunger for success. I was the thinker, Adrian was the talker. I had plans, he had charm. Together, we made a perfect team. When we started our company, a small construction firm, people laughed. We had no capital, no connections, just drive and a second-hand laptop that overheated every hour. But where others saw obstacles, we saw possibilities. We worked day and night, drawing designs by hand, pitching to clients who wouldn't even look at us, taking jobs so small they barely covered fuel costs. Yet, we believed in what we were building. And slowly, the tide began to turn. Our first big contract came from a property developer who liked my ideas. We poured our souls into it. Adrian handled negotiations, and I handled the engineering side. The project succeeded beyond expectations, and soon, our company began to grow. By our 5th year, we had moved from that tiny office to a glass building downtown. We named it RA Developers, Richard and Adrian. The name symbolized everything we stood for: loyalty, friendship, trust. Or so I thought. As the company grew, so did our wealth, and with wealth came whispers. Investors began noticing Adrian more. He had that way with people, smooth, convincing, magnetic. He loved the spotlight. I loved the work. It was a perfect balance at first, but I started seeing changes. Subtle, quiet, but undeniable. He began calling himself the founder. He stopped consulting me on decisions. And worst of all, he began spending company funds like personal money, expensive cars, private parties, overseas trips under the guise of business expansion. I confronted him once. I remember it clearly. It was late evening in his office, the city lights glowing through the window. "Adrian," I said quietly, "we agreed that every major expense goes through both of us. I don't understand this new purchase." He laughed. "Richard, you worry too much. You handle the technicals. Let me handle the finances. That's what I'm good at." I looked at him for a long moment and said, "You're good with people, yes. But don't let that make you careless with trust." He smirked, patted my shoulder, and said, "Trust me, my friend. I've got this." Months passed, and things got worse. I began noticing irregularities in our financial statements. Funds missing. Signatures forged. I stayed quiet at first, hoping it was an error, until one morning I walked into the office to find that my access to company accounts had been revoked. At first, I thought it was a mistake. But then Adrian walked into my office with 2 lawyers and an envelope. He said, without blinking, "Richard, the board has voted to remove you as a partner." I stared at him, stunned. "What board? There is no board. It's you and me." He shrugged. "Not anymore. I brought in investors, real investors, and they don't see value in having a co-founder who's stuck in the past." I felt something crack inside me, not my pride, not even my hope, but the belief that brotherhood was unbreakable. I left that office without a word. I didn't fight back. I didn't call the police. I just walked away. Because I knew something Adrian didn't. Karma never sleeps. It might rest, it might wait, but it never forgets. The next few years were hard. I went back to nothing, the same way I started. My house, my car, even my savings had been tied to the company. I was too trusting, too blind. But life has a strange rhythm. When one chapter ends in betrayal, another begins in rebirth. I spent nights sketching ideas, reading, planning silently. Then one morning, I received a call from a developer who had worked with us years before. He said, "Richard, I don't know what happened between you and Adrian, but I need you. I trust your integrity." That call became the seed of my comeback. I started again, this time, small and quiet. I didn't chase fame or power. I built from honesty. Every client I worked with, I treated like family. Every promise I kept. Years passed. Slowly, people began to notice me again, not because of my wealth, but because of my consistency. My company grew, quietly but steadily. And while I was rising, I occasionally heard whispers about Adrian's empire, grander than ever, but surrounded by rumors. Something about unpaid loans, corruption, illegal contracts. But I didn't care. I had made peace with my past. Until the day karma knocked on my door. It was a rainy afternoon when my secretary entered, saying, "Sir, there's a man outside. He says he needs to see you urgently. His name is Adrian." I froze. The name felt like a ghost returning from the grave. I nodded. "Send him in." When he walked through that door, I barely recognized him. His once sharp suit was wrinkled. His face looked older, thinner, broken. He smiled weakly and said, "Richard, long time." I stared at him in silence. He sat down, his eyes pleading. I didn't know where else to go. And that was when the story truly began again. For a moment, I didn't say a word. I just looked at him, this man who once stood beside me, wearing designer suits and a smile that could sell anything to anyone. Now, he looked like life had wrung him dry. He sat across from me, avoiding my eyes, his fingers trembling. "Richard," he began softly, I made mistakes." I leaned back in my chair, quiet. Not angry, not cold, just still. "Mistakes," I repeated, my voice calm but edged. "You stole my company, Adrian. You forged my signature, took what we built, and left me to start from nothing. Those weren't mistakes. Those were choices." He swallowed hard. "I know. And I've paid for them, God knows I have." I looked at him, not with hate, but curiosity. "Go on." He sighed and leaned forward, his voice breaking. "After you left, things went well for a while. The company grew. Investors came in droves. I thought I was unstoppable." He paused, staring at his hands. "But greed, it's like a poison, Richard. It doesn't stop at enough. I kept taking more, bigger risks, shadier deals. The money blinded me. The power drowned me." His words hung heavy in the room. Then he said something that froze me completely. "One of my biggest investors turned out to be a front for money laundering. When the government began investigating, they traced every transaction, and my name was everywhere. The company was seized, accounts frozen, properties gone. I lost everything." He laughed bitterly, wiping a tear. "Everything I took from you, gone. Just like that." I studied him, the man who once called me brother now sitting in front of me, broken by his own ambition. "So," I said slowly, "why come to me?" He lifted his eyes. "Because you were always the better man, Richard. You had principles. You had peace. And I," he shook his head, "I have no one left. My wife left me. My children won't speak to me. I'm living in a rented room. I came here not for help, but to say I'm sorry." He stood up, his eyes glistening. "I don't deserve forgiveness. I just needed you to know. I finally understand what loyalty means." I remained silent for a long time. I could feel the storm inside me, the part that wanted revenge, and the part that remembered our brotherhood. Finally, I spoke quietly. "Adrian, when you betrayed me, I thought my life was over. But in truth, you freed me. You forced me to build a version of myself that didn't depend on anyone else. You were my greatest pain, but also my greatest teacher." He lowered his head, tears falling freely. I continued, "Forgiveness isn't something I give because you deserve it. It's something I give because I deserve peace." He looked up in disbelief. "You forgive me?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, Adrian. I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. I won't rewrite what you did, but I won't let it poison the rest of my life either." He broke down, crying like a child. And for the first time in years, I reached out, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Go and make peace with yourself," I said softly. "That's the only forgiveness that truly counts." He left my office that day, quieter than he came. Weeks passed. Then, one morning, I saw his name on the news. Former CEO Adrian Cole found dead in apartment, overdose suspected. I sat in silence, the world around me fading. He had been found alone, surrounded by bottles and unpaid bills. The same man who once owned luxury mansions and fleets of cars had died in solitude, a prisoner of his own greed. The world called it tragedy. But I knew it was karma, not in vengeance, but in balance. Months later, I attended his funeral. Few people came, mostly strangers. His wife and children stayed away. I stood by his grave, the wind whispering through the trees, and said quietly, "You had everything, Adrian, but you forgot that peace can't be bought." I dropped a white rose on his coffin and walked away. As I left, I realized something profound. Karma doesn't always come as thunder. Sometimes, it comes as silence, as loneliness, as the weight of guilt that never leaves a man's heart. But the story didn't end there. A year later, I received a letter from a law firm. Inside, a note in Adrian's handwriting said, "Richard, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I left something for you, not because you need it, but because I finally understand what partnership truly meant. Thank you for being the brother I couldn't be." Attached was a document transferring ownership of one of his last remaining properties, a countryside home, to my name. It wasn't much, but I didn't see it as wealth. I saw it as closure. One evening, I visited that house. It was quiet, surrounded by pine trees, with a lake behind it reflecting the setting sun. I stood there, breathing in the silence, and whispered, "Life gives us mirrors, Adrian. Some show who we are. Others show who we could have been." And as the wind blew gently across the water, I knew karma had finished her circle. They say karma never sleeps, and now I understand why. It's not punishment, it's balance. Every choice returns, sometimes in loss, sometimes in peace. But one thing is certain, no betrayal ever escapes the quiet justice of time. Because the universe, in all its silence, always keeps the score.